Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Food with Viktor. Today I'm going to be cooking a ribeye steak, or also so called entrecôte. And since this is my channel and I love the sous vide, of course we're going to use the sous vide this time. And it wouldn't be a sous vide episode if we wouldn't use the sous vide's best friend, the vacuum sealer. We're going to vacuum seal up the steaks together with thyme, garlic, black pepper. Those flavors will be infused into the steak while we cook it sous vide style. Some of you might be wondering what the sous vide is, and what it is pretty much it's a water circulator. It circulates water at a very precise temperature. You will see later in the video, and I will also explain a bit more later on. But now it's time to get cooking. I will start off sprinkling normal kosher salt generously over the steaks on both sides. And since this is a ribeye steak or entrecôte, it has a lot of fat built into it, and this will help during the cooking time with the sous vide to break the fat down and tenderize the meat. And as I said before, we're gonna use black pepper as well. And don't use any old black pepper. Get your pepper mill ready, or if you have a mortar as me, now it's time to use it. And there we have it. In my opinion, one of the best smells in the world. Freshly grounded black pepper. And same here as with the salt. Cover both sides generously and make sure it sticks to the meat. And if you have a much thicker steak than I do, make sure to cover the sides with a generous sprinkle of salt and pepper as well. And now it's time to prepare the steaks for the vacuum sealing, and we will be adding garlic and thyme to the steaks. And what I like to do is just to smash the garlics before putting them into the vacuum bag. If you cut them up or mince the garlic, they will add too strong garlic flavor, but if you put them whole in, they will add a nice umami and a hint of garlic. And when it comes to the thyme, try as much as possible to use fresh thyme. If you're a student and can't afford it for some reason or can't find it, you can use dry thyme as well, but I really recommend to use fresh thyme here. And also especially because we're gonna fry the thyme later with the steak with a bunch of butter and other goodies. Now it's time to vacuum seal up the steaks. Here I'm having a vacuum machine, but if you don't have it or can't afford it, or for some reason it's not working for the day, you can use YouTube or Google like DIY how to vacuum seal a steak. You can use a straw and dip it down into the water and it will create its own vacuum seal. But this will create a little bit better result with the machine. And what this machine actually does, it's vacuum out all the air from the bag. So when boiling them, the whole steaks and every part of it get contact with the right temperature. If you're doing it the other way with the straw I was talking about, you might have some air pockets that the temperature is not the same all around the steaks, so we get the uneven cooking. This will make sure you get a very precise and very even cooking through the whole steak. And one thing here is worth noticing. I'm not using any butter or any oil on the steak. I will use that later during the frying, but during the sous vide, you get a much greater result by just making sure that it's rendered in its own fat and not other kind of fat like oil or butter. There we go, as simple as that. Both steaks are ready for its bath. And here I'm bringing forward my giant water container. And if you don't have one, it's perfectly fine to use as a regular pot. You can watch my other videos on how to boil an egg to see an example of that. And for you guys who don't know what a sous vide is or what it does, it's pretty much a water circulator that circulates water at a very precise temperature. And as you can see, we have vacuum sealed the steaks before here, so we'll get a very even cooking surface, so the temperature will be precisely 52 Celsius around the whole steaks. And since the temperature can't get any higher than 52 Celsius, we pretty much idiot-proof this part of the process. And now we're just gonna leave the steaks here for 2 hours, and we'll check back later. once 2 hours of waiting has passed, it's time to check on your steaks. And as you can see here, they're kinda gray and doesn't look good at all, but just wait, we'll fix that soon. Here I'm using a big knife to take them out from the package, but a spatula or something like it works totally fine as well. And if you have a much bigger steak than I do, usually you end up with a lot of juices in the vacuum bags afterwards. And save that for later then, to make a great sauce, but we'll not cover that in this episode, that's for another one. And here we have a great steak smell, infused with thyme and garlic. And once your steaks are a little bit cooled off, remove the thyme and the garlic and put it on a separate plate. We'll be adding that later when we're frying them up. And also it's very important to remove any moisture from your steaks. If you don't do that, you will end up boiling your steak in the frying pan and you will end up with a steak without any searing on it. And that's no fun. And a small tip here is to clean your cutting knife, so you don't forget it later and end up cutting your steak with a dirty knife. I'm using tallow when frying my steaks. It creates a deep beef flavor and also it can tolerate a very high temperature without burning. So you can create a very high temperature in pan before you put the steaks in, and that will create a great sear. And for you guys who don't know what tallow is, it's pretty much rendered beef fat. For a second best option, regular canola oil will be fine as well. And prepare to have a knob of butter close by and also your herbs from the sous vide bag to be able to add them quick later on during the sear. And temperature-wise, when cooking your steaks, try to go as high as possible. If you can make the pan glow, that's pretty good. A good tip is if you can't hold your hand over the pan anymore, then it's a pretty okay temperature. And since we already cooked the steaks for 2 hours and it's beef, so it would be perfectly fine to eat rare, this part of the process is only for the Maillard effect to create the almost caramelized surface and also a great sear, of course. And how long to cook your steaks on each side? That's pretty much depending on how thick your steak is and how hot your pan is. I would guess I'll be cooking mine on around 30 seconds on both sides. And when flipping your steak or dropping it into the pan, try to releasing them away from you, if that makes sense, to avoid getting splashed or burned by all the grease. And for around the last 20 seconds, add the butter and the herbs to the pan and baste the steaks with the herb-infused butter. Once your steak feels ready, time to remove them from the pan. And same goes here. If you're going to create the whole dish with this steak, make sure to save this butter and herbs for the sauce. But as I told you before, that's for another episode. And a very important step that often or almost always get forgotten: rest your steak. I can't stretch this enough. If you have a much thicker steak than I do, rest it for at least 5 to 8 minutes. Make sure to cut against the muscle fiber on your steak. And what we're going for here is a medium to medium rare cooked steak. And ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, and as any responsible chef or amateur chef, of course you need to taste test the results. And maybe this is not a surprise, but this is great tasting juicy steak. I like to serve my steak already cut up on a communal plate. Just make sure that the plate is a little bit heated up before serving. And last but not least, make sure to add some sea salt in the end. This will help to elevate the steak flavor and also add some nice crunchy texture to the steak. And if you feel like it, perfectly fine to add a sprinkle of black pepper as well. And fellow watchers, there we have it, a perfectly cooked medium steak. And until next time, I wish you all a great day.